Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Just wanted to let you know we still see the number of participants growing, so we'll give it a couple more minutes and we'll start. All right. Thank you. All right, I start to see some questions. So as we're still waiting for a couple of folks to join, this is an informational session. The work that'll be resulting from this will be circulated shortly after this PowerPoint presentation. So there's nothing providers will need immediately to participate in today's webinar. All right, we're going to start the administrative process slowly. We're still climbing up, so good afternoon. As a matter of a couple of housekeeping items, I just want to go through, and I see a lot of call-in users, and while we did have you register to participate, we'd like to make sure we have the actual participants who, listen to this meeting. So we're going to start to go around, and we'll unmute you as we go through the, looks like, dozen or so call-in numbers that we have. And please just tell us who you are and where you're from. So first call-in user is area code 201798. Looks like you might be muted.
Jim Malley, Esperanza Center.
Jim Malia?
Correct.
Where are you from, Jim?
Esperanza Center.
Okay. Okay, we have a 516870 number. Like you might be.
Hi, Vincent Kona calling from Family Residences.
We have a 646285 number.
Sam Kahn, that has center.
Okay, thank you. We have a 302388 number. Just bear with me. I did not bring my readers today, and I'm reading pretty small font.
Douglas Loman from the Salvation Army.
Thank you. So what is that one? 917992.
Good afternoon. It's Amy West, AHRC, New York City.
Okay, the next call-in we have is starts 347560.
This is Jennifer Hines Moore from the Guild for Exceptional Children.
Okay, the next call-in we have is 845, is that 359?
This is Chris Rampersad, St. Dominic Family Services.
Okay, thank you. The next one we have is 845624.
This is Lisa Corrine from Venture Together.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I see Janet Martin has her hand up. Okay, I see a couple hands up. If you guys are having technical communication problems, can you let us know? We're not going to get through this in an hour if we have one-off questions, so we'd like to just initiate the conference call. Yes, this is being recorded. All right, we're going to get started here. So before we ask any questions about whether or not you need to participate in the survey because you like your payments, let's just run through the PowerPoint because yes, you're expected to respond to the survey that we're going to go over in a few minutes. So Joanne, I'm going to turn it over to you to give a brief intro here, and then we can start with walking through the new survey tool.
Okay. All right. Good afternoon. This is Joanne Howard, and Kevin Valencius was talking previously and will be following my comments today. First of all, we just want to say good afternoon, and today we will be talking about the OPWDD American Rescue Plan Act Workforce Stabilization Initiative, and we are specifically referring to the overview of corrective actions and timetables for survey payments. Just to give you some background here, I'm sure you're all aware of it, but the background will be good for informational purposes. OPWDD offered 4 ARPA-funded payments for direct care staff. And direct care staff are those staff that are coded as 200 on the consolidated fiscal report in the not-for-profit sector. 2 of the initiatives were survey-based. That's the COVID-19 service and the vaccination incentive. And 2 were based on the CFR, information from the CFR, and those were the longevity payments and the retention payments. We will be, as we'll discuss again later, we'll be focusing on the survey-based payments in our conversation today. We also want to remind you that an agency's ability to participate was contingent upon the completion and return of assigned attestation by January 9th, 2022. As I had said previously, the focus today, and our only focus, is on survey-based COVID-19 service and vaccination incentive payments. We are not discussing anything with reference to longevity or retention. This is, today we'll be discussing a new survey-based ARPA payment process. This is a singular opportunity to confirm or correct survey-based payments via a streamlined survey process. Again, we stress this only applies to COVID-19 service and vaccination incentives. A new survey link for this survey will be released today, February 6, 2023, after this webinar. To be eligible to participate, providers must have submitted the original attestation by its original due date of January 9th, 2022, and completed a survey for one or both incentives within the original time frame. And again, the incentives we are only talking about today are the COVID service and the vaccination incentive. We are not talking about longevity or retention. They were not survey-based. The new survey must be submitted, and this date is critical, must be submitted by February 17, 2023, and staff counts must still adhere to initial eligibility criteria. So the criteria that your original surveys were based on still hold for this resurvey. Prior to completing the survey, you should review your rate sheets to identify the number of staff reported in each category for whom the current payments were calculated. Just to let you know that OPWDD does not have any record from any agency that would otherwise identify the names of staff reported as eligible for either of the survey-based payments. That is information you have and you have alone as the provider of service. Providers are strongly encouraged to print the summary screen that will automatically be generated once they submit the new survey responses. Again, we don't have that information. You should retain it. You should print the survey screen. So a little chart here. And I'm going to see if we can we make this so.
Yeah, I can try to. The plus.
Just, okay. All right. First of all, the first thing that you should do is collect all of your background information for the COVID service and the vaccination incentive payments. Your rate sheets, the original information that you submitted. If
So this is Joanne just trying to.
yeah, this is Joanne trying to get closer.
Reading screen.
First of all, were your survey payments accurate? If your survey payments were accurate, as identified here, you answer yes. You submit and print the response. All you are going to be doing with reference to a survey is giving us some background, identifying information. You identify that your survey payments are correct, and that's all you have to do. Your survey is done. So, yes, if you feel your payments were correct, we still want you to fill out the survey, but that's all you have to do. You just have to indicate to us the survey is correct. If you feel that either your COVID-19 or vaccination incentive surveys were not correct, then you would fill out one or both of the surveys, depending upon what you thought was correct and what you thought was not correct. You would be identifying the total number of staff, and then you would be submitting the response. Again, all right, we asked you to identify which incentive payments you were intending to correct. It's either the COVID-19 or the vaccination incentive or both. And then we also encourage you to print a copy of the response for your records.
Thank you, Joanne. So as Joanne said, I know we saw a couple of questions coming through the chat, right? This is really intended, if you're okay with your payments, it's a pretty straightforward process. And we're going to go through, you know, an example of a survey in a moment. But just to reiterate what Joanne said, if you have no issues with either or both of your payments, you just simply say yes, and you're done, right? There's some background information needed. It's not that simple, but once you provide your background information, you click yes, and you're done. If you believe that there was a difference between what you were paid and what you intended to report on your survey or surveys from the prior period, taking a breath here for a second, then you will identify which of the, you know, payments, or as Joanne said, both, you're intending to correct. You will have to attest, you know, to really reaffirming what you had originally attested to, you know, initially back and submitted and signed by January 9th of 2022. And, you know, go forth and correct and identify the total number of people eligible, you know, in the full-time, kind of, you know, part-time and less than half-time categories. Again, total counts. Don't try to do anything of the incremental difference. eMedNI will adjudicate the incremental difference and either pay you more or less depending upon, you know, what the survey results are. So let's just go on to the, you know, the draft survey. I keep seeing a couple questions about audio. I mean, I think most people seem to be able to hear, so I would suggest that if people have issues, that they check their own equipment. We can't troubleshoot remotely from here. So what we're going to do here is kind of show you a, how do I click on that? No. Do I press Alt or Control?
I can unshare it and we can share it a different way.
Yeah, maybe that's what happened. I thought it worked before from that thing.
I did before.
Just bear with us as we pull up the. So I can just control, right? So we'll probably have to share the screen now. I think we could stop sharing the PowerPoint. Right? Share, yes. Beautiful. All right, thank you, Josie. So all of you should be able to see a you should be able to see on your screen now a web link that will bring you to do the survey. Now this applies again to whether or not the survey is correct or you need to make corrective payments. So let's just go through and try to show you what would happen here. So just want to stress, Corp ID, it's a 5-digit code, the same 5-digit code affiliated with your cost report submissions. We saw, you know, some people trying to put in federal employer ID numbers, your tax ID numbers. Nope, 5-digit code. Not letters, not dashes, 5 continuous numbers. So in this case, I'm going to use a fictitious agency. Okay, is the Corp ID. Type it in, agency name. Kevin's program, contact person is Kevin, me. Now see if I hit enter, it tells me I did something wrong. So then I'll put in my title, and then I'll put in my email address. Okay, but then once all those required fields are in, you click next. And then here, we're simply asking if the rate sheets aligned, right, with what you had intended to pay, you know, and if not, right, if they are, you simply click yes and you click submit. I don't know if I can hit back, so I'm not going to do that because I don't want to detract. And then you would be done, and there will be a survey screen that will be generated that shows your responses, okay? In this case, I'm going to pick no, and we're going to click next. So here you're attesting, right, that clearly what was communicated and what you had attested to on January 9th is accurate. You continue to do that, and you understand that if your payments were in error and you were overpaid, and you're putting a smaller staff count on here, that you will immediately repay the money, right, that had been identified as an overpayment. So I click yes. Now, what it automatically does then is it shows you one of 2 boxes that you have to pick. So in this case, I'm going to say both of my payment.
Fill out the first one, and you can go.
You can go to the second one. So let's just say that the COVID Heroes Pay survey was incorrect. And I'm just going to put numbers in here just for fun times. Now, the critical thing here is this is by authorities. We noticed that there are some challenges in the first survey about knowing, you know, what authority your program is operated under. So HCBS are waiver-funded Medicaid-eligible services. DAHAB, RESHAB, SEMP. So SEMP really shouldn't have any direct care staff. You know, ComHab, right? Respite. Those are your waiver services. There's a litany more that I didn't identify, but those are your waiver services. Non-HCBS Medicaid, think of as your state plan authorized services. ICFs, day treatment, clinics, right? Things where you are authorized pursuant to the state plan. Non-Medicaid are those services that don't leverage federal financial participation. Okay, so if you have a direct care staff funded through a family support services contract, this is the column that you would report them in, all right? So I'm just gonna go through, right? These are all the same criteria. The survey, for those of you that participated in the second vaccine survey that was due in February of 2022, you'll notice that this is very similar in terms of its level of detail. Authority, and then staff eligibility criteria, because the bonus payment for each full-time staff member is dependent upon what their level of effort was. So the number of part-time staff, right, less than 20 hours per week, all right? So I'm just gonna say that I have lines of business everywhere, and I'm gonna try to do something where I can just do halvesies, okay? Here I'm going to have, again, these are direct care staff who, as Joanne said earlier, reported in Title Code 200 in your CFR, worked for a minimum of 90 days during the pandemic, which at the time we did the survey was defined as March 17th, 2020 through the end of the payroll that ended on or immediately after September 1st, 2021. Those same eligibility requirements still apply. We did not get federal approval to change that. So number of part-time staff greater than 20 hours per week, but less than your full-time schedule. So I'm just going to multiply everything by 2 to keep it simple. Now, number of full-time staff. So you all have deferring work weeks, right? The state for direct care staff is 40 hours. So, you know, in Kevin's agency, it's the same thing. Okay? So the totals will automatically be tallied down here. And now, if I was done, and this is the only one I was correcting, I would just click submit. But in my instance, I also realized that my vaccination incentive payment was wrong, so I'm going to click vaccine incentive too. And the same chart appears here. Now remember, the direct care staff had to be vaccinated, have their vaccination regimen completed by January 14th, 2022. Okay? Different requirements for participation. I think it was the payroll ending on or immediately after January 14th, 2022. So that's the full-time, that's the actual body counts, not FTE positions or anything like that, the number of staff who meet these requirements. So just to make it, you know, and there can never be a decimal point of a person, right? It's going to be 5, 3, and 1, okay? Just to keep it simple. And then we have 20, 12, and 4, okay? So now I'm going to double check to make sure, because as Joanne said, this is your singular opportunity to correct these payments. If there's a resubmission of a survey, you know, we're gonna have some problems. So the expectation is that these are the right staff counts, person counts, employee counts in each one of these, you know, categories. And again, just to reiterate, this is critically important to be able to separate, because the Appendix K authorities do not extend to anything beyond HCBS waiver services. So as we talk about the ARPA funding, okay, hold on. This is the only one we're worried about in terms of its ARPA applicability. We are still dealing with a separate federal authority to even get approval of these. So it's critically important, and that clearly the feds don't participate in this cohort. This is a state benefit being extended, you know, unbudgeted for in our financial plan. So again, critically important. And again, the breakdown between these are important because it prorates the amount of bonus each staff person will receive. Okay, I think the vaccine, for example, is maximum of $500 per full-time staff.
Correct. Right?
$250 for less than full-time but greater than 20 hours. Less than 20 hours per week, it's $125. So you can see it's critically important that the staff are rated in the appropriate categories. Okay? Now, what was that question?
Are they putting the total number?
No, as I said before, this is not an incremental change. This is not your opportunity to incrementally change what's on your rate sheet. Put the total number of staff that you intended to submit in your initial survey. eMedNey will correct the payment incrementally, right? So if you intended to submit 140 HCBS Medicaid positions and you initially reported 100, you will put 140 in the survey, and eMedNey will pay you the balance. If, as we've heard, there was an agency that put, say, 500 people in, and they expected only to have 10, and they report 10, there will be a lump sum negative payment put in eMedNey to recover the difference in staff and payment. Do not do increments, do total. And I think we've tried to stress that here. Okay, so now this is the other critically important. I've double-checked this, and again, I've checked with my CFO and my payroll people and agree that this is the right count, because I understand that once I click here, we're not correcting the survey. I click submit. And what this does is it will show you, unlike what we had done before, which is, you know, kind of a key point that Joanne raised in her presentation, we have no record other than, you know, the staff counts that were provided of what the agency did to get to that number or anything. So this is at least some degree of record, so we know who completed the survey, what their title was, what their email address is, that you said that the payments were wrong, and that you attested to all of these great things up here. And then it does show you, again, by authority, it's arrayed a little bit differently just from the way we had it reporting out, but this is for the COVID-19 Heroes Pay. You can see the HCBS Medicaid, the staff groupings, right? The non-HCBS Medicaid, so state plan, the staff groupings, non-Medicaid. So it gets you to the same, you know, information that you just entered in the prior page, and then the same thing here with the vaccination incentive payments. Okay? So the goal is that you would simply print this screen for your records, and this avoids, I think, some of the issues that we've had outreach on since late October, you know, about simply taking a spreadsheet as, you know, the record of what was intended to be submitted in the survey. This is going to be the de facto record. And we'll even go a step further, is we are in a position of even being able to PDF this information and separately emailing you a summary of your results. So there's, not only would you have this for your record, but we'll have, you know, the summary result. Once this is submitted, it creates a unique identifying record for each agency, and we'll be able to attribute that unique record with, you know, with the agency and provide that information back to you. Okay. All right. So I see there's a lot of questions in the chat about the operational requirements of initially even participating in the survey. So before we get there, are there any chat questions about what I just went over in terms of the survey tool, our expectation in the process? And I should say we'll get there in a second, right? Because we have I just stopped this, right? And then how do I go back to your main presentation?
It should hopefully go right back to it.
Okay. So, yep. So we'll keep going through the rest of the presentation here. So what we're going to want to do is today we're going to be releasing the new survey, which none of you have received yet. What I just went over was a link that was intended to show you, to me, really how straightforward the new survey tool is. That'll be released today, and you'll come to the same screens that I just went through with you. Again, no issues. You think the payments are correct, just click yes. We'd appreciate that so we can conclude this process. The goal is, with the release of this revised survey, this concludes the payment process, right? It's shutting down. Okay, so it's critically important that those of you that feel like the payments were inaccurate, take the time to go through and make sure you have the right information, because we're not going to correct it again. And as Joanne indicated earlier, the new survey must be submitted. That button I clicked at the very end where I clicked submit, again, either yes or with your corrected payment information on there, staff counts, by February 17th, 2023. So not this, so there's, in essence, 10 complete business days to complete this survey. Once the window closes, we're going to recalculate. So after February 17th, the new payment amounts and revised payments will be made through a combination of lump sum Medicaid payments, positive or negative, and through the FIDA plan. Remember, we've seen some questions come through from providers who got paid by the FIDA thinking it was more than just the COVID service payment. The FIDA was arrayed a little bit differently, and your PA reps can talk to you about the differentials. But if you had 95% of your fee-for-service people enrolled, and that's identified on your rate sheets, the percentage that we paid through the FIDA, we will be amending the payments the FIDA will be making or has made to you to reflect these appropriate levels, okay? So not everything is going to be coming through fee-for-service. I'll pause there for a second. So we have a new survey mailbox that was established to correct the payments, to address any questions or comments to. It's revised _ COVID _ survey at opwdd.ny.gov. We'll be monitoring that mailbox daily, and we'll do our best to timely respond. Okay. And yes, I see some chat questions, more recently ones. This is going to be, we'll have this recording. I'm not sure if it'll be on YouTube. It'll be somewhere on our website where we can post this and you can read it. Yes, we know that the information, I have no way to determine whether or not the information contained in our payment file was accurate, because we've seen, we were actually able, from one agency, had done a really good job of taking screenshots of each of the pages of the prior survey, the 44 screenshots they had, and we were able to timestamp to really see that there was an issue in how we interpreted that data. But since we've been working with the provider associations to correct this, it seems like most agencies did not have those screenshots to be able to corroborate, the errors in the payment. So this is an opportunity to correct the payment. We can take it or we can leave it. So I saw some questions about PHP. So again, I'll do this quickly, and I would just ask that people take notes, because PHP's payments are different. Fee-for-service paid each one of these 4 lump sums in one foul swoop, right? PHP is paid on calendar year that split the payments up differently. So longevity and COVID service, which were related to 2021 dates, were paid by the plan through the initial preprint #1 payment process. Now, we know that there are some providers that didn't get their longevity payment in that, and we're going to wait to correct those payments until we have the corrected survey results from this survey. But think of it this way: PHP's first payment, and money that many of you have received, was to cover the balance of your rate sheet for COVID-19 service and longevity. Payment #2, which you have yet to receive because it has not yet been approved by the federal government, includes the vaccine payment and the retention payment. That is going to be paid sometime in an unknown date in the future. Based on prior timelines, I would say probably the second or third quarter of this calendar year. to be safe.
Do you want to put us on mute for a second to go over a couple of these?
Yeah.
We don't want them to correct. Determine people at the time, the survey was correct at the time, and then they keep those numbers. And yes, they can give out additional money.
I see there's some questions here about the FAQs, so let me try to go back up. I see a question here. The COVID service asked for a count for the count of staff that worked 90 days prior to 9/5/21. Actually, it was, it's 90 days from 3/17/20 to 9/1/21, or the payroll that ended immediately after that date. And the vaccination incentive payment was for people that were vaccinated as of 1/14/2022, or the period ending immediately thereafter. Payroll period ending immediately thereafter. Not really sure. There's some questions in here about the proration of staff between authorities. I mean, I think no one can really work more than, you can't really spread a full-time person, right? So I think if Kevin worked in an HCBS waiver program, half-time, less than 20 hours, or just say 20 hours a week, and then in a state plan, 20 hours a week, I would count him as a 1 in both of those areas, because Kevin should then be paid as a full-time equivalent person.
Okay, all right. One of the FAQs identified that if your survey information was correct, and because you had people that left at the time that you received the survey monies, you could distribute more than the 1,000 for COVID service or the 500 for vaccination incentive. That's absolutely correct. All right, we're not correcting, what we're doing here is correcting errors. If the information was correct at the time that you submitted it, then we're not making changes here. If you got additional money, more than 1,000 per person for COVID service, or more than 500 per person at the maximum for the vaccination incentive, because individuals that you reported on the survey left before the survey monies were distributed, yes, you would still, as the FAQs indicate, you can give the people remaining more money. You're not correcting the surveys to identify people that left your organization. It's not what we're doing here. This is if your original, if what we have included on your rate sheet does not reflect what you originally intended when you submitted the surveys.
And that applies, right, because remember, there were some of you that participated. We had tried to streamline the vaccine survey, right? So we had done a second streamlined vaccine survey that looked like this, right? So remember, the staff eligibility counts in the attestation, as Joanne said, right, the original eligibility counts, at this point, they're immovable, right? They are what they are. The goal is to correct for that. If you've had attrition since then, we're not changing rates, we're not giving money back. It's those eligibility requirements still hold true. So I'm way up in the chat, so I'm gonna go down and see if there's any.
Full-time is per your agency's definition of full-time.
I see some questions about what does PHP mean. So the Partners Health Plan is a fully integrated duals advantage or FIDA demonstration provider that is, in essence, right, provides managed care services to people on a voluntary basis. That includes the DD, DD fee-for-service benefits in that package. And some of you have had enrollments. Right now, FIDA, I think, only operates in 9 downstate counties. So it really would only be applicable to those providers operating programs in New York City, Long Island, and I think the very southern tip of the Hudson River Valley up through Westchester. If you reported, and if you had enrollments on either 12/1/2021 or 1/1/2022, you will not get 100% of your payment through fee-for-service. It'll be prorated based on a calculation of those enrollees in the FIDA plan against your total enrollment base that we had in tabs, and that's the percentage that was paid, through FIDA, and the inverse of that percentage was paid through fee-for-service. Again, all of you in that position should look at your rate sheets, and you'll see a very bottom, like, Aaron, I think it's called like a FIDA IDD percentage or something, right?
Okay.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, as Kevin said, there can't be more people eligible than were reported on the original survey. I mean, you identified who was eligible at a point in time. That is what you utilize. We're only correcting if what you identified on the survey is not what you were paid for, or what you meant to identify. And also, Kevin identified the fact that you had to, when you are filling out these surveys, you differentiate in your numbers between HCBS, state plan, and non-Medicaid. You don't just report HCBS. You didn't just report HCBS in the original survey. That's not what you do here. Here, you just have to, you have to differentiate between the 3 categories, but you report all 3. Just differentiate between HCBS eligible, state plan eligible, and non-Medicaid.
And remember, some of you may only offer like ComHab as a service, right, or a couple day programs, right? So you would only have HCBS in that case because you're not authorized to deliver anything else. So it all depends on your service, portfolio. For those agencies, I don't know, had never heard of the ARPA funding opportunity. No, this is only intended for those providers that submitted an attestation by 1/9/2022.
And submitted the timely survey.
Yep. This is not for any waiver other than OPWD's waiver, so I'm not sure how the children's waiver would fit in here. This is for our 1915C home and community-based services waiver, and the attendant. We're not paying for, DOH administered waiver of services.
It's the 200, the Title 200 is reported only on the OPWDD CFR. You're eligible for reporting on the OPWDD CFR.
We don't have what I just said before about the PHP payments is what you guys should be taking notes on, right? The longevity and COVID service are preprint number 1, they've been paid. Preprint number 2 are vaccine and retention payments. They have not been paid. They will be paid at some point between today and your higher power willing 9/30/2023. okay? So I don't have a schedule of payments for them. They follow the same initiatives, just different timelines. The retention payment and vaccine payment were dependent upon 2022 calendar year eligibility dates. They've been split slightly differently. I'm not sure how to answer the question about that you submitted a timely survey but didn't receive funding. I mean, some of that, maybe you had 100% participation in PHP, but if you submitted surveys and completed the attestation, you should complete this survey payment, because if ultimately your payments get processed and they're the same, you'll get the same amount, right? The goal here is to make sure that at the end of the day, we know that there's accuracy in what was paid and reported, and this time there's a record of what you will have been submitted to us, and you should then therefore have a record of what you should see on your rate sheet to ensure that the state picked up your survey results correctly.
And we don't know what you mean by other positions in the 200 series. This applies to 200. If the individual is correctly reported as code 200 on the CFR, then they're eligible. They would have been eligible for the COVID service or vaccination incentive payments.
We're not re-pulling the enrollment snapshot for PHP enrollees. That should still be based on what's on your rate sheets. I think Joanne addressed this earlier. You know, if you feel you were overpaid because of attrition, you have two options. One is to give more in a proportional basis to the remaining DSPs, or you can send the money back to DOH. Right? This survey is not intended to reflect who's on payroll and otherwise meet those eligibility requirements. This is intended to reflect the initial eligibility requirements for staff, so that we have the correct aggregate payment. So we're not adjusting for attrition or new hires. We're not sure about the timeline. Again, I think we laid out the next steps, you know, the timeline in the process, or the process in the next steps section. Provided we get the survey results back, well, whatever's back in our hands by the close of business on February 17th, we'll work to correct those payments. As is the case with every other Medicaid payment, they have to be approved by certain internal control agencies and run through the process. So we're trying to push hard to get this money out the door as soon as possible. What that looks like and the exact timelines, I don't know. Our goal is that overpayments will be recouped through eMedNI by a negative lump sum, just as how you were paid with a positive lump sum. I do not support the imposition of accounts receivable balances, because these are ARPA payments that should either have been used or not used, right? And so the money should be immediately available for payback. Okay. All right, thank you all. Again, any other questions, please address them to the mailbox on your screen, and thank you.